Greetings, everybody. Sorry about that problem with the live stream. Sometimes the YouTube's policy is that the owner of the copyright gets the advertising revenues. So that may have been a change. Sometimes they'll just block, and sometimes they'll just let the film run and then grant any advertising revenue to the copyright owner. So I don't know what was going on there. So I'm just going to wait for some people to join the stream. And so apologies for all that. So greetings, everyone. That was a classic movie. And so what you missed at the end was the battle, the famous battle scene where the so-called boxers come in and attack the diplomatic compound. So let me just try to set this up a little bit. For those of you new to the channel, and I see my name is Mud, I believe you're new to the channel, so welcome, and welcome everyone else who's joining the stream and who's viewing the channel either live or by recording. And I especially greet those who are new. So the purpose of this channel is to explore evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. The ultimate goal is to serve the viewers and especially the Christians so that they can have a stronger walk in the faith. If they find evidence and reasons for the Christian faith, I believe that'll help people's faith be strengthened and their walk with God stronger. So that's the main purpose of the channel. I enjoy having these little talks every now and then. It's also very helpful to me to be able to fellowship with my brothers and sisters, that we can comfort and strengthen one another. And it's just been a great experience. I'm not, even if there are only one or two people here, I feel extremely blessed. I'd like to thank everyone who came out to my debate yesterday. I feel it's important that I engage the other side in their arguments, especially. Now I have maybe over 100 people wanting to just argue with me, and I just don't have time for that. But I will try to take the best representatives of the other opposing viewpoints, those that are non-Christian or as far as theology, and as far as biology, those who advocate abiogenesis and evolution theory. I'll take on someone who I feel might represent the best the other side has to offer. And I'd like to thank James Downard for being my representing the opposing viewpoint in my debate yesterday. I plan to minimize trying to do too many of those, but I do want to show that I'm willing to engage the other side. But within reason. I mean, I'm not going to spend. I already have 100 people just wanting to argue with me and take my head off, so to speak. And if that number increases to 1,000, it's just not going to be practical. So I do want to engage the other side, but my heart is to help Christians in their walk, and also to fellowship with them, because their presence helps me in my walk. So we help each other, and that's the way it should be. Now, I heard in church this morning, and by the way, this was the first time I'd been in, while Mom was alive, she and I were in pretty much a strict isolation. And then after I got the vaccinations, I felt freer to travel and move around. And so I joined the congregation at my local church for the first time in like 13, 14 months. So this is a real blessing. And I did bawl my eyes out this morning. They, one of the elders before the congregation lifted me up in prayer, and I just bawled my eyes out. Sorry, I'm a very emotional person. in addition to just all the events. So I just lost control during the whole service. And but it but the elder quoted a verse that I've alluded to several times, in which I've taken comfort. It's from Thessalonians. The Apostle Paul says, "We do not grieve as those with no hope," and that was a great comfort. And then also in the service this morning, and I'm going to try to find. Let me try to bring this up, and I'll read it. One moment, if you'll forbear with me. I got a little bit disoriented because we had to restart the stream. So I'm going to read this section of Psalm 77. And it does echo what I feel this channel is about. And it's also God's word. So all the more reason to share it on this Sunday night, this Lord's Day. Psalm 77, verse 11. And I'll read 11 through 14. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. So for me last night, this was my chance to remember the works of the Lord. And what we do here is, oh, wow. Someone said he's reading this psalm right now. Wow. Wow. Here on this channel, I like to say this is a low drama channel, meaning a lot of channels get a lot of their views and viewers by just generating as much drama as possible. And, people are trying to jump in the conversation and just give their opinions. And they're just waiting to see what the next bit of drama or fight is coming up. And I'm not into that. I mean, put it this way, I could enjoy that, but that's not what God put me on earth for. And I don't believe that that's why this channel exists. This channel is to remember the deeds of the Lord, to ponder his work, and to study the works, the wonders that God has made. And so, yes, things can get really nerdy here when we talk about biology, but those are some of God's wonders. There's also, I haven't had the chance to articulate more of the wonders of the universe and the galaxies and the solar system. There are things that I studied that show that these are also miraculously constructed. I don't believe that our solar system evolved by some nebula. That was the prevailing theory. That was what I was taught. But as I studied the matter more, it has kind of the same problems that abiogenesis has. So these are mighty deeds of the Lord. And that's, as we study these things, it says in Romans, his eternal power, his divine nature are clearly seen by the things that are made. So in studying what God has made, we call it nature, but I want to say it's God's creation. That's a more accurate term. As we study God's creation and the wonders that he has made, we will get to know him. And so I'd like to think that that's what this that's what I'd like to commit to. Now, for those who are new, so a large proportion of this channel will be studying creation science. I like to say the figure's about 65%. That's just totally an estimate. There's no I've done an exact accounting, but that's kind of what I think I'll aim for. And 15% will be Christian testimonies, because what God has done in people's lives is also a testimony to him. The Lord said, let your works be seen before men so that they may glorify God. And so to that end, collectively, we ought to help teach the history of what Christ has done in people's lives. And when I taught a private apologetics, quote unquote, Bible study, the most favorite segment of the study was always the testimonies. The creation science was a little bit too heavy for them. And so we're going to cover some Christian testimonies. And this is of a Christian missionary. So let me see what else I have to share. So it also says, Proverbs 25:2, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It's the glory of kings to search out a matter. The Christian walk often is seeking the things that God has hidden. God hides certain things so that those who really want to find him are separated from those who don't. It's the Lord said that the gate is narrow, and the path is difficult for those who find eternal life. But the gate is wide, and the path is wide that leads to destruction. And so I mean, on some level, it's like I wish it weren't like that. I know one pastor that wanted to see more people get saved, but the Lord said it's going to be challenging. And so for those willing to seek, you'll find things. I began to find things, but I really was at the end of my rope. And faith is built by fellowshipping with other Christians, especially righteous people who will pray for you. It says in James 5:16, confess your faults before one another so that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. When I was nearly out of the Christian faith, I looked for people who could pray for me, and their prayers helped restore me. This is about 20 years ago. And there's another model of that. At the Last Supper, Jesus told Simon Peter, he said, Simon, I pray for you that your faith may not fail. So that tells me an essential component of our faith being built is righteous people praying for us. I've tried to say that, kind of this self-help idea of just make yourself and force yourself to believe. I don't think that that's exactly what the Bible teaches. I think the Bible teaches that Jesus Christ is the author and finisher of our faith, not ourselves. And so as we humble ourselves before God's people, we humble ourselves before the body of Christ, and we're acknowledging that Jesus Christ is the author and finisher of our faith and our ability to believe. And what I feel God has done in my life is he's given me a chance to work in creation science, and it's helped me. But I've been interested in other things. So let me see. I did have my program. Okay, so I really was hoping YouTube would not cut the video as I was showing it. I found that what they often do is the copyright owner will get the advertising revenue. Like if I show it on my channel, sometimes they'll just send the advertising revenue to the copyright owner. So it's really a win-win situation in that case. But for whatever reason, sometimes it's stricter than that, and YouTube will block it. So apologies for that, because this was it was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Now, to be fair, there was a lot of there was a lot of artistic license in the movie, which I did not know as a kid. I just thought it was really cool. I mean, it was a very, like a lot of storylines, it was very simplistic. You had the good guys and the bad guys. And on some level, there are bad guys on both sides. And sadly, even some of the missionaries were not so wholesome. Not Frank Gamewell, not Francis Gamewell, who I'll be talking about today. But I'll just describe the end of the movie, 55 Days in Peking. So these guys at the diplomatic compound, let me see if I could show, can I find it? It might be helpful to show maps, because this is also very compelling history. Okay, so why don't I just go ahead and show see if I could show the things from the article. Yeah, there's some really, so we have some of this is from Wikipedia. And there was an 8-nation alliance: the United Kingdom, Russia, France, Japan, Germany, United States, Italy, and Austro-Hungary. And they were, let me see if they had they had this, let's see if they have a better map. I don't think they, there it is. Show this map. So they had this thing called the Legation Quarter. I would presume it's similar in word to the word delegation. They just called it legation. I don't know that for a fact, but it took me a while. So if you look here, there's this thing called the Legation Quarter, and it makes sense that it's near where the government of China at the time was headed. And at the time, it was an empire run by the empress named Cece. I can't pronounce her name. They called her Cece, something like that. And in China, they had this thing called a forbidden city. I believe it was called that because the emperor or empress forbade anyone to enter or leave the city unless they had permission. And so the Forbidden City in China has a very rich and sordid history. But going back to this, to the story, this is the diplomatic compound. It's called the Legation Quarter. I may refer to it as the diplomatic compound. And this is where all the drama, where the siege was. So you could see the empress is right here. Surrounding this diplomatic compound were these boxers, these guys called boxers. And I'm going to describe the boxers in a little bit. But then the empress was giving kind of like a like what often happens in political dealings. She said, well, our imperial army is going to protect the diplomats and the missionaries and the Christians, and they didn't. In the middle, somewhere around the siege, the imperial army of the empress ended up joining the boxers and besieging the diplomatic compound. A lot of Chinese Christians and foreign Christian missionaries, like say from the United States, they had only the only place they could find refuge for a lot of them was in this diplomatic compound, the Legation Quarter. And sadly, there were about over 3,000 of them, of the Chinese Christians, were taking shelter here along with the Christian missionaries and then the diplomats. So it was very interesting. But sadly, about 300,000 Chinese Christians were murdered. Maybe a couple hundred Christian missionaries, including American missionaries, were killed. The famous missionary Hudson Taylor had 50 missionaries that were part of his organization killed. So this was really bad. So this was in the exactly 1900. All right, let me see what else okay, so at the end of the movie, as Hollywood would go, they you could see there the let's see if I can open this. So I believe this is a picture of the Americans defending the American part of the diplomatic compound. And at the very end, let's see if I have, they have some really nice paintings and renditions. They even have, okay, oh, here's some pictures. So we have these, this is what a boxer looks like, martial arts person. That's a rendering of their outfit. And this is the Emperor Sisi, the Empress, which is also kind of another, it's like, how did she become Empress? Well, she started out as a concubine and then she ended up becoming the Empress when her emperor died. So let's see if they have any pictures. Okay. And I'll show this picture here of Francis Gamewell, missionary. This is the picture of the fighting Parsons, the fighting preachers. And so that's Gamewell right there. Okay, he looks like a real tough guy. He is. So you could see here kind of the rendering. These are the American Marines. And then you have the preachers here. And then they're fighting the boxers. And so let me see if I can get a picture of the boxers. The boxers and the Empress. So there, okay, so that's kind of the drama here. And so at the end, see if they have another, at the end, eight, I think I need to get another, at the end, 8 nations came in. Let's see if they have any pictures of the, oh, it was, oh, here's some, okay, so this is, maybe this is an interesting rendering of it. So you have the boxers here, but then you could see all the different uniforms. There are 8 nations that converge on this compound. And so the end of the movie was pretty, was a pretty nice dramatization of where these, the people in the diplomatic compound were rescued by the 8 nations. And it had a nice storyline. It's like, you know, the good guys are defending themselves from these evil boxers and the wicked Empress. And she was, like a lot of emperors, not the most wholesome person. And then you see the nations coming in and rescuing the Christians and the missionaries and the diplomats. And it looked all very happy. And this is a little bit of the cultural commentary. See, that storyline resonated at the time of the movie, which is around 1963. The portrayal of the Christians as people you should rescue rather than persecute and kill. That narrative, sadly, is changing now in this culture, and I've noticed it. So this sort of movie is not, you know, I don't know how well it would really, you know, I don't know how it would really be received in today's culture. Now, that being said, that picture is highly sanitized and romanticized because the rescuing forces were colonial, and after they won the battle, they were looting and plundering and doing all sorts of nasty things. And unfortunately, some of the Christian missionaries were accused of being involved in the looting too. So, okay, so that's the same. You know, I just want to be historically accurate here. And there are the behavior of some of the Christian missionaries in China left a really bad taste. And so when the communists under Mao Zedong took over, Christianity came back, it was really the few remaining Chinese Christians that kind of rebuilt helped rebuild Christianity there, and they didn't have very nice things to say about the foreign missionaries, like say from the United Kingdom or the United States. But that being said, like so many things, I'm happy to just point out history, because if you read the Bible, a lot of God's people had a lot of flaws. Oh my goodness. It is not it's not sanitized in the Bible. Some of the patriarchs, all the dirt is just written there for us to see. And so God can use flawed vessels to communicate his gospel, and praise God for that, because on many levels, flawed as their conduct may be by our modern day standards of what we would expect, the grace of Christ reached that nation and planted the seed, and it was almost extinguished. But there has been the analysis that maybe there are possibly more committed Christians in China right now, and under communist China, than in the United States. There are many more. There may be just as many who love the Lord as here in the United States. Now, in both countries, we are the minority, but praise God for that seed that was planted. So now let me share a little bit about who the Boxers were. And I have, oh, by the way, let me just kill some windows here, because it's going to just slow down my stream. And actually, for safety, I'm going to set up a backup here. And so apologies that for the little bit of delay. I'm going to start. I'm going to add another, just a bot user, in case we have a interruption of service. I'll be able to continue the stream. So just give me a moment. It occurred to me to do this. Give me a moment, and thank you in advance for your forbearance. Just all right. I think I'm almost there. Just one moment. In the meantime, I'm going to show. Let me show one. That's the woman in the middle. That's the Empress, and the woman holding her hand is the ambassador's wife. So I'm just gonna. I just happen to have that picture. So now I'll talk about the Boxers in this Boxer rebellion. Okay, so these are Chinese. They are called the righteous, and they call themselves the righteous and harmonious fists. They arose in inland sections of the northern coastal province of Shandong, long known for social unrest, religious sects, martial societies. American Christian missionaries were probably the first to refer to the well-trained athletic young men as boxers because of the martial arts and weapons training they practiced. Their primary practice was a type of spiritual possession, which involved the whirling of swords, violent prostrations, and chanting incantations to deities. Okay, so now I have something on. Okay, so it says this type spiritual possession, and so I'm going to describe it here. Chinese spirit possession is a practice performed by specialists called jitong, a type of shaman in Chinese folk religion, involving the channeling of Chinese deities who are invited to take control of the specialist's body, resulting in noticeable changes in body functions and behavior. The most famous Chinese spirit possession practitioners took part in the Boxer Rebellion in the 1900s, when boxers claimed to be invulnerable to the cut of a sharp knife, bullets, and cannon fire. Now, I don't mean to make too much of this, but if you in accounts of the New Testament, you know, some of those that were demon possessed, the guy that there are accounts that they were. Please, Lord, forgive me, and please the viewers, if I get this, as my memory fails me a little bit, but they were chained and they were able to break out. They were just they were able to suffer, you know, things that would otherwise cause injury. I think there was one case that they were going from, you know, that they were walking through fire. Okay, so this does remind me. Now, whether this really happened with them, I don't know, but I wouldn't rule it out because they are appealing to devilish spirits. And if they're getting possessed, I mean, in the New Testament, demon possession was bad, and that's something you didn't want to have. But these practitioners of this spirit possession, Chinese spirit possession, they're welcoming it. And this is part of the Boxer Rebellion. And I only found that out. I only found this historical piece this last week because I was so fascinated by the movie. I just happened to run across it. And I said, I want to find out more of the history of this. The state of Qi had shamans who claimed to be possessed by gods, and they were criticized as heterodox by Confucians. Movements by shamans practicing spiritual possession often led peasant rebellions against the ruling dynasty during Chinese history. The Boxer Rebellion was one of many peasant movements led by shamans who claimed to be possessed by spirits. For the Boxers during the Boxer Rebellion, spirit possession was used for protective purposes. And Godzilla Freak says, I'm almost certain these accounts are just delusions. And I'm totally fine with that. Now, Larry Clinton Thompson, in his book, William Scott Ament and the Boxer Rebellion, Heroism, Hubris, and the Ideal Missionary, has a description of the spirit possession practiced by Chinese boxers. Whirling and twirling of swords, violent prostrations, and chanting incantations to Taoist and Buddhist spirits. When the spirit possession had been achieved, the boxers would obtain invulnerability and superhuman skills with swords and lance. And that's all I'm going to say at this point. Now, we know that people can drive themselves into a frenzy and just do stupid and evil things. And so I'm, that could be an explanation, but they did do stupid and evil things, and that's that's a matter of historical fact. So let me read the account of this siege. And so I showed the map where the diplomatic compound was, right near the Empress, and then the Boxer Rebellion was causing a siege. So let me see. I want to say one other thing. If you'll let's see if I could do this one more time. So a summary of the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion, Boxer Uprising, or I can't pronounce that, was an armed and violent anti-Christian and anti-imperialist anti-imperialist insurrection in China between 1899 and 1901, toward the end of the Qing dynasty. It was initiated by the militia united in righteousness, known in English as the Boxers, because many of their members had practiced Chinese martial arts. Also referred to in Western world as at the time as Chinese boxing. Villagers in North China had been building resentment against Christian missionaries and the growth of foreign spheres of influence after the Sino-Japanese War of 1895. In a severe drought, violence and murder spread across Shandong and the North China Plain, targeting foreign property, Christian missionaries, and Chinese Christians. In June 1900, Boxer fighters, convinced that they were invulnerable to foreign weapons, converged on Beijing with the slogan, "Support the Qing government and exterminate the foreigners." Foreigners and Chinese Christians sought refuge in the Legation Quarter. In response to reports of an invasion by the eight-nation alliance of American, Austro-Hungarian, British, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and Russian troops to lift the siege, the initially hesitant Empress Dowager Cixi supported the Boxers, and on June 21st issued the imperial decree declaring war on the foreign powers. So I'm going to just stop there and we'll go to the siege of the legation. So this was the actual siege. The siege of the international legations occurred in 1900 in Peking, the capital of the Qing Empire, during the Boxer Rebellion. Menaced by the Boxers, an anti-Christian, anti-peasant movement, 900 soldiers, Marines, and civilians, largely from Europe, Japan, and the United States, and about 2,800 Chinese Christians took refuge in the Peking Legation Quarter. The Qing government took the side of the Boxers after the eight-nation alliance invaded Tianjin at the Battle of the Taku Forts, 1900, without a formal declaration of war. Foreigners and the Chinese Christians in the Legation Quarter survived a 55-day siege by the Qing army and the Boxers. The siege was broken by an international military force which marched from the coast of China, defeated the Qing army, and occupied Peking, now known as Beijing. The siege was called by the New York Sun the most exciting episode ever known to civilization. How do you like that? The most exciting episode ever known to civilization, and we've never heard of it. And I will highlight some of the comments here. I doubt the spirit channeling was merely delusional. Demonic spirits play a key role in such chaos, such as in the case of BLM terrorism of 2020. Okay, I'm going to be kind of like neutral on this, but I do believe the devil works in people's hearts. You know, where it becomes possession or not, I'm not really knowledgeable in that. And there may be some truth in spirit channeling, but being immune to blades is another question. Yes, obviously, because the Allied armies did manage to kill quite a number of Boxers, so they weren't immune to blades. And these are interesting. And thanks for your comments. I agree. I think that goes beyond anything similar in the Bible. I think the demons probably relish in the death of the host. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, just kind of take it for what it's worth. I've dealt with some of the anti-theists and who've openly sworn their allegiance to Satan if the Christian God were proven. Yeah, some of them are really, a couple are really sweet people, but some of them are not, and it's kind of scary. And I do think that there's a spiritual influence on their heart. I wouldn't call it full out possession, but um, if just in general, if someone just keeps turning their back on God, even when God has offered grace to them, I can't, I would assume it doesn't end well for their souls, even in this life. But anyway, so this most exciting episode ever known to civilization, and a notable part, and I'll cover. So it's talking about this most exciting episode ever known to civilization, and I'll just briefly show here. It had all of this with the foreign armies, but very noted, and the emperors and empresses and all these nations. But somewhere in there is a mention of the missionaries, and then I'll cover one of them. The British, American, French, German, Japanese, and Russian military guards each took responsibility for the defense of their respective legations. The Austrians and Italians abandoned their isolated legations. The Austrians joined the French, and the Italians collaborated with the Japanese. The Japanese and Italian force established defense lines in the Fu, a large mission and park where most of the estimated 2,812 Chinese Christians taking refuge were housed. And let me see if it has it here. American missionaries took over management of most necessities for life in the Legation Quarter, including food, water, sanitation, and health. MacDonald's most important appointment was Methodist missionary Francis Gamewell as chief of the fortifications committee. Gamewell and his crew of fighting Parsons were universally acclaimed for their defensive work surrounding the British legation. Now, to the best of my knowledge, even though they were called the Fighting Parsons, I've looked around. There's not any account of them, as far as I know, actually involved in combat, but they built the fortifications. So that takes us to the story of Francis Gamewell. And so I found this article in the archives of, I think, Dickinson University, and I'll just read it. It is a beautiful account. Frank Gamewell, or Francis Dunlap Gamewell. Francis Gamewell was born in Camden, South Carolina on August 31st, 1857. His father, John Gamewell, was an inventor. His most famous accomplishments include the Gamewell fire alarm and the police telegraph. As a young child, Frank was profoundly influenced by his family's close involvement with the Methodist Episcopal Church. Actually, I didn't even know that there was a Methodist Episcopal Church. Coincidentally, Gamewell's uncle, Dr. Charles Taylor, was the first medical missionary sent to China through the Methodist Episcopal Church. As Southern sentiment for the war between the states, that's the Civil War, started to increase, John decided to move his family to Hackensack, New Jersey. At the age of 18, Frank matriculated to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Unfortunately, his undergraduate career was interrupted by a serious accident. When he returned to school, he decided to make the move to upstate New York and attend Cornell University. In a strange twist of fate, Gamewell again had his school year interrupted by misfortune. He contracted a severe illness and was unable to attend classes for several weeks. After he recuperated, Frank decided that his current path was not the calling God had intended for him. With his family roots in mind, he matriculated to Dickinson College in 1877, which was at the time affiliated with the Methodist Church. Under the advice of several clergy and professors, Gamewell made his decision to become missionary and subsequently put his fate in the hands of the Foreign Missionary Society of the Methodist Church. In October 1881, Reverend Frank D. Gamewell arrived in Peking, China. He soon met his future wife, also a missionary, and in December they were married. Fortunately, Mrs. Gamewell recorded her life as an agent of the church in her diaries, which were later compiled into a volume entitled Mary Porter Gamewell and Her Story of the Siege in Peking. This work is an excellent reference to the turn of the century missionary life in China. In 1884, the Gamewells started their first collective missionary in Chongqing. Mary described it. Our West China mission has its present home in a well, or a series of wells. The buildings which unite to form these walls, are fine buildings. They are all well built. They are supported by many expensive pillars of wood. After searching 2 years for a site in March of 1886, they began expanding the mission by building a hospital, a girls' school, and several mission homes. Mary was a missionary in the traditional sense of the word. She was most likely to be seen at the local Sunday school spreading the gospel and teaching young Chinese girls how to read. Mr. Gamewell, on the other hand, was appointed superintendent of the West China Mission, and in this capacity, he supervised the construction of most of the buildings. His portfolio includes the erection of the largest Protestant ecclesiastical structure in China. It held 1,500 people and was by far the most auspicious structure of the Methodist compound. While they made progress physically in the erection of buildings and the expansion of the compound itself, the Gamewells faced adversity at every turn, especially with the almost constant threat of riots. Mrs. Gamewell describes many instances in her diary where she was not sure when she was not sure if Mr. Gamewell would make it home in time to quell the rebellions gathered in front of their home. At one time, she even took Frank's gun, although unloaded, in an attempt to scare away the natives. The Gamewells' knowledge of local customs was quite limited, and they often inadvertently offended their neighbors. And here's an account of how. This instinctive hostility to foreigners becomes almost religious frenzy among the unreasoning masses when it is fired by popular superstitions. The foreigner erects buildings above a given elevation and thus obstructs the flight of irritable spirits and excites their rage against a helpless people. The baptism of dying infants is part of a devilish science by which certain parts of the human body may be put to the transmutation of metals. I don't understand that sentence, sorry. The erection of orphanages is for this same fiendish alchemy. Okay, this is my reading of it, and I think that the Christians are baptizing dying infants, and in the perception of the Chinese, they viewed it as part of a devilish science. And then also the creation of orphanages is also part of, in the view, their Chinese neighbors as part of a fiendish alchemy. As was typical of other missionaries, after 10 years of missionary work, the Gamewells returned to America. During this break from missionary life, Frank studied physics at Columbia and received his doctorate there. When the Gamewells returned to China, Frank began his career as a professor at Peking University. Oh, I love that. A missionary, he's a physics professor. All right. I guess you guys can tell why I really especially like this particular missionary, a physics professor and a missionary. That's really cool. While staying in Peking, the Gamewells found themselves once again embroiled in a series of riots. Unfortunately, as time progressed, the rioting evolved into what is now known as the Boxer Rebellion. Frank's architectural experience was known around the city, and the mayor soon called upon him to supervise the fortifications of Peking. And I presume this next passage is from Mrs. Gamewell's diary. Mr. Gamewell had, early in the progress of affairs, called masons and built solid brickwork over the outside of all gates in our walls that could be dispensed with, thus providing against their being fired by the Boxers, who were daily assuming a more threatening city. He also had barbed wire stretched across the courts to prevent a rush of the enemy in case they should break into premises. After the coming of the soldiers, the work fortifying went well. The Boxer uprising took its toll upon the city as well as on the Gamewells. Mary's sustained bout with illness had brought her to a breaking point. The Boxers invaded the city immediately before Mrs. Gamewell planned to leave for America to receive medical treatment. On August 22nd, 1900, she left China, never to return. Mr. Gamewell was appointed by the missionary board of the Methodist Episcopal Church as field secretary of the Open Door Commission. Unfortunately, the events following his appointment remain unknown. In 1906, Mary died, leaving behind a tale of woe about a journey to a foreign land and its native customs. For her, the culture proved to be too entrenched in pagan rituals to readily accept the Christian ideals that men and women from places like Dickinson College sought to bestow. Now I'll read an account from Wikipedia, which is also good. And I'm not going to read the whole article. I just selected highlights here. So we also knew of this. I'll read a little bit more details of the Boxer Rebellion. Now, I'll tell you why this resonates with me, and I really mean no offense. And what I'm about to say could say that's about missionaries. I could be, my perceptions about people have been wrong. And so I'm just reflecting my feelings in former times of my life. And so if I'm mischaracterizing this, it's on me. But when I was an engineer and my perception of Christians was mixed. Some of them were just wonderful people, and some people I just couldn't deal with. And as you know, sometimes I've not had good relationships with pastors and missionaries. And I felt that, sometimes my feeling was, do these guys do anything except run their mouths? I know that's a mean thing to say, but I'm just saying that's how I felt. Now, there's some really sweet people, but I'm just like, can you be a little bit more useful to society than just running your mouth? And of course, I'm running my mouth right now, so, who am I to complain? But I never could understand. It's like, are just going to go there and talk. And I'll tell you why I had that negative attitude. I said, you can get out there and preach, but you're not persuading me. Can you do something? Can you say something that'll make me believe the Christian faith more than just assertions? And I had a negative feeling. It's like, anyone can just get up there and read the Bible. I can read it too. What I needed was someone to help me believe. And now, I apologize for that negative perception, but, nowadays I feel like what can help is as we live the Christian life, and this is one reason I like the idea of tent making. Paul was a tent maker. He didn't, he had the right to get to make a living off being a Christian pastor and missionary and church planter, but he chose not to exercise that right. And I could see that it helps the Christian witness if you're just right there with where all the people are. They can identify with you a little more if you're right there struggling with everyday life. And that's something that I sort of kind of resented in church culture. It was like you have the preachers and then you have the people, and somehow their jobs are, their lives and the things that they value and what God has called them to, or they're just like second-class citizens. I know a pastor who had a son who was studied math, and he was kind of, the pastor was like, how could you be studying math? You ought to be preaching the gospel, as if the gift that God gave his son was to be rejected. And I always had problems with that. And so this is why this particular story of Gamewell became a physics professor. It really resonates with me. And then the idea of Mrs. Gamewell teaching children to read. I said, they're making themselves valuable. They're meeting the physical. They're not just meeting the spiritual needs, but also the physical needs of the people they're seeking to minister to. They're not just preaching to them. And so, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just, if there are pastors listening, I got to say, the bivocational pastors who are out there, like I know one pastor, he was a landscape worker. He had a landscaping business, and then on Sunday he would preach. That really resonated with me. It's like you're fighting along with the rest of your congregation to put food on the table. You're experiencing what we're experiencing, and I really respected him for that. I didn't have a lot of respect for preachers that would get up there and just scream and scold the congregation for their lack of faith. That didn't do anything for me. In fact, that's created a lot of resentment in me even to this day. Just talking down to people rather than empathizing with their plight. So this is why the story of Frank Gamewell resonated with me. And now I know the moral issues about participating in military defense and war, but just what it's worth, I'll just read how he served his fellow Christians, the Chinese Christians, to protect them from violence of these boxers that were trying to channel demonic spirits. In early 1900, an anti-foreign, anti-Christian peasant movement spread toward the Shandong presence. And so I already covered that. So now I'll record a little bit. The period between June 8th, and again, this is detailed, but I want to see I want to detail what someone's Christian walk is like. The period between June 8th and June 20th is called the semi-siege, as foreigners in Peking came increasingly under attack by the Boxers. Gamewell organized the defenses for the American and British missionaries and several hundred Chinese Christians in the Methodist compound. He asked for and received 20 Marines from American Minister Ambassador Edwin H. Conger. And I showed a picture earlier of Conger's wife with the Empress Sisi, to assist him in the defense. The church was converted into a fortress. Gotta love it. The church is converted into a fortress. The church was converted into a fortress. The altar was fenced around with a barricade of boxes of condensed milk, biscuit tins, baskets of household silver, etc. The missionaries organized themselves into committees. Chinese Christians were conscripted to dig trenches and build stone and barbed wire barricades. It was good training for the siege to come. While the missionaries were fortifying their compound, the Boxers were raging through Peking, destroying foreign establishments and executing Chinese Christians. Foreign soldiers in the Legation Quarter exacerbated the situation by firing on Chinese demonstrators and mobs and killing many people. Like I said, there was some very unwholesome behavior on both sides of this conflict. Now the siege of the legations. On June 19th, the already ominous situation in Beijing took a turn for the worse when the Chinese government ordered all foreigners to leave the city within 24 hours. Fearing they would be massacred if they left the Legation Quarter, the foreigners decided to defy the order. The next morning, the German minister Baron Clemens von Ketteler was murdered in the streets. Conger ordered all the American missionaries to take refuge in the Legation Quarter and that afternoon, they and their Chinese converts abandoned the Methodist compound and walked to the British legation, where all the foreigners in Beijing were offered sanctuary. The Chinese converts were housed elsewhere in the Legation Quarter. When all had gathered, there were about 900 foreigners in all, about half being civilians, the other half soldiers from 8 different countries, and about 2,800 Chinese Christians. The next morning, amidst the chaos of hundreds of people milling around the British legation, the British minister Claude Maxwell MacDonald appointed Frank Gamewell as chief of staff of the Committee for Fortifications. He gave Gamewell absolute authority to organize the fortifications of the British legation against the anticipated attack by the Boxers and the Chinese army. Gamewell took the job with alacrity. A British author described him. Gamewell is the man of the hour. Already the British legation, which at the commencement of the siege was utterly undefended by any entrenchments or sandbags, is rapidly being hustled in order by the masterful hand of this missionary. The hard-worked man always finds time for everything. It is a wonder. The members of Gamewell's fortification committee, missionaries all, were called the Fighting Parsons. So here is the picture of the Fighting Parsons. Well, is this gentleman, I believe, according to the caption. It looks like a real tough frontiersman. The members of Gamewell's fortification committee, missionaries all, were called the Fighting Parsons. Now, the term parson, it is like a preacher, but they have certain they live in a parsonage and they have I don't know how it relates, but they have certain authority over the property. And so, I call them preachers, parsons. There is a distinction, and no need to go into that there. But so it's just the term parson is something that I learned. And by the way, there was also in the American Revolutionary War someone who was also called the Fighting Parson. That might be an interesting topic too. Gamewell wanted thousands of sandbags, and American missionary women scoured the Legation Quarter for sewing machines and cloth. Curtains, silks, satins, damasks, and expensive cloth of every kind was cut and sewed by missionary women into bags, filled with dirt and placed on Gamewell's barricades. Gamewell spent his days superintending the filling of sandbags, the tearing down of houses adjoining our walls that might serve as cover for the enemy, the building of barricades and strengthening of walls from the timbers and bricks so obtained, and making loopholes at the proper places for firing through. Now, if this sounds reminiscent in the Book of Kings, you hear all the detailed architecture that Solomon was doing, and throughout the Old Testament, God spent a lot of time describing architecture in the Old Testament. In fact, even in the New Testament, there's mention of architecture. This is something that is, now looking at this account here, God is like an architect. He invests a lot in describing it to his people, and then inspiring the writers of the scriptures to describe it in detail. And that resonates with me as an engineer. It's like, this is a godly work. It's a godly enterprise to be converting matter and making it functional, and adding wealth to humanity. So again, this is why this missionary really resonates with me. It really resonates with me. He's not just like, some of the people that I've run into. We talk about the Christianity eroding in the United States. And I think part of it is we've had a lot of these privileged people just sitting in the pulpit and babbling. And probably the worst example, one of the worst examples recently is Josh Harris. He wrote the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and that was just a fad. It wasn't biblical. He didn't. I could when I read the book, I said, this has hardly any reference to Scripture. You didn't even go through and take accounts of the relationships between men and women throughout the Bible, like say Isaac and Rebekah, Boaz and Ruth, Ezekiel and his wife. I mean, there's so many, no mention of it. And he was trying to represent his kind of fad policy as being God's way, and that he's going to solve all these marital problems as a result. Well, he ended up getting divorced and then leaving the Christian faith, and he was pastor of a megachurch. And I totally saw that coming. And so, you know, I'm sorry to be kind of sour grapes when I say about my experiences in the church. There are people that, you know, their value seems to be to just talk. They don't want to get their hands dirty and really care for people where there's a need. And I'm sorry to say that, but, you know, I can't help but notice that sometimes. I can't help but notice that sometimes where I've seen real love shown when people are, you know, there's a lady in my church and she's caring for 2 disabled children, godly woman. And then when I see people caring for, in our church, they're caring for orphans and widows. That's what really resonates with me. True religion is caring for widows and orphans in their distress. And so when someone does that, they've earned the right for me. They've earned my respect, and I owe it to them to listen to them when they speak on the Christian faith. So anyway, I just had to echo that because I see a lot of bitterness in the atheist community. And I said, well, it doesn't totally surprise me because some of these that come from these evangelical churches, like Josh Harris's church, it's like, yeah, I totally get it. I could see why you're so turned off. And, you know, I'm not going to defend what has gone on. Oh, yes. Amen. I've seen the best and the worst people in church leadership. Yes. Yes. The best and the worst. The best. So I don't want to paint a broad brush because I've had some wonderful pastors, but I tell you, those best have just left a bad taste in my mouth. Recently at the local congregation, and I actually liked this pastor, unfortunately. He got caught. The police were called to his house because he was beating his wife and kids. That left a really bad taste in my mouth. And unfortunately, I liked it. He's one of the few preachers I really liked as far as his Sunday morning sermons. So anyone, and you know, that was kind of my cultural commentary too. Gamewell's fortifications were needed. Chinese attacks on the Legation Quarter began on June 22nd and would continue throughout the 55 days of the siege. He insisted on powerful barricades. At one strong point, he had a barricade built 8 feet thick, consisting of brick and rubble and earth and capable of withstanding cannon fire. Gamewell had a new challenge on July 13th when 2 underground mines exploded beneath the French legation, killing several French soldiers. Gamewell set about digging countermine trenches 10 to 12 feet deep to surround the British legation. In preparation for the last extremity, he had bomb-proof shelters built, trenches 6 feet deep and covered with timbers, and 2 to 4 feet of sandbags and earth. Gamewell's fortification proved effective. Not a single civilian was killed in the British legation, although several were killed defending the Legation Quarter, and the siege became less of a battle than a stalemate with only sporadic attacks. Gamewell was still strengthening his fortifications when an Allied expeditionary force raised the siege and rescued the foreigners and Chinese Christians within the Legation on August 14th, 1900. I've got to share this. Pastors are supposed to beat the wolves, not the sheep. We love you, Mr. Jetty. Your sense of humor. That was great. Yes, pastors were beating the wolves in this case. Later life, Gamewell was feted in the United States as a hero of the Boxer Rebellion with honorary degrees from Columbia and Syracuse. He was appointed by the Methodist Church as field secretary and later executive secretary of the Open Door Commission. His wife Mary died in 1906. He married again to Mary Mind, 1858 to 1947, and the couple returned to China as missionaries in 1909. So the other account I gave didn't tell this part of the story. He served 15 years in the position of Secretary of Education of the Methodist Church in China and 12 years as the General Secretary of China Christian Education Association. He retired to the United States. Frank Gamewell was described during the siege as the mildest of men, a stooping figure, very quiet and rarely speaks. All the numerous eyewitness accounts of the Boxer Rebellion describe him favorably. He exemplifies what American ingenuity, willing to get his hands dirty, as many were not, in achieving a vital task. He was a master builder, an organizer, and a quiet but obviously effective leader. He appears never to have had any great success in the missionary endeavor of converting Chinese to Christianity, but rather focused on education, especially science education. And if I may comment here, even here in this Wikipedia article, it says he appears never to have had any great success in the missionary endeavor of converting Chinese to Christianity. First off, it's the Spirit of the Lord that makes Christians. We are only His servants, and the measure of success in God's eyes is your heart. We see that in the book, in so many places in the Bible, but like the first thing that comes to mind is the Church of Philadelphia. It was a small church, but it was precious in the Lord's eyes. And I believe that in the Smyrna church were the only two churches that the Lord didn't have anything bad to say, but He really liked the Church of Philadelphia. Praised them. He said, you're weak. You don't have a lot of power. And contrast that with presumably a big church like the Laodicean church. And so I like this account that he focused on education, especially science education. So now you know why I really like this story. It is interesting history, drama on all levels, and he's kind of like my kind of missionary. So, Mr. Jetty, I really want to thank you for your input. Pastors are supposed to beat the wolves, not the sheep. And so I left a link for those who want. That's one thing I wanted to say. For those, because our movie was cut off, and I don't want to disrespect people's copyright. And sometimes I really don't know whether YouTube will say, hey, that's okay. We're just going to send the ad revenue. YouTube does run ads for them, not for me. I don't get any money because my channel's not monetized, but they do run ads on some of my shows, and I guess the revenue goes to YouTube. But then when they also do that, if there's copyrighted material, a lot of times the ad revenue go to the copyright holder. And I was hoping that would be the case. But I left a link in the other stream. I'm going to put it in the video description here, and you can watch the 55 Days of Peking. You can contrast it with the way that we have gone through it here. I wanted to say that, I have nothing against fiction. And in fact, C.S. Lewis Um, let me see if I could just share this here. This is from the notes that I wanted to share today. C.S. Lewis said, in reading Chesterton as in reading MacDonald, I did not know that I was what I was letting myself in for. I did not know what I was letting myself in for. A young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful in his reading. But there are traps everywhere. Bibles laid open, millions of surprises, as Herbert says, fine nets and stratagems. God is, if I may say, very unscrupulous. So all this to say, I'm not at all against watching movies or reading fictional stories. The Lord taught many principles through parables, and sometimes there are things we can understand about human nature, about ourselves, and ideas through the movies and fiction. And the reason I had that C.S. Lewis quote was Lewis studied a lot of fiction. That was his professional, job as a professor of, I believe it was medieval literature or some sort of, literature like that. But it was in the study of that he began to get hints of God, because when you study literature and human affairs and their wants and their desires and the things that they imagine, even though it may be corrupted by the fall, we are all made in the image of God, and we learn something about the Lord by studying humans. Granted, it is a distorted picture, but there's still something of the Lord in there, and it's expressed in literature and art. And all this to say, I did like this movie. And that's a picture of Charlton Heston and the Baroness, the fictitious Baroness Natasha Ivanov. And so, just take it for what it's worth. If the movie doesn't do anything for you, I take no offense. But I'm just sharing it because it was a movie I liked. And that's part of the fun of being on this channel. I get to share talk about things that I like, and whether you like it or not, that's okay. At least I've had the chance to share a story of the things that have been part of my past. When I was a little kid, this was really one of my favorite movies. And the last 2 weeks, I encountered it totally by accident. I couldn't stop watching it and couldn't stop studying the history, because frankly, just hearing the news and how all this in the United States, they're trying to do all this revisionist history and mischaracterizing things. I just, it's refreshing to actually study the history that we never learn about. So with that, let me close again with Psalm 77, which I opened the show with. And I hope I've had the chance to, in sharing the life of the missionary Gamewell, the Lord said, "Let your good works be seen before men, so that they will glorify God." I've tried to do that today by helping showcase the works of God's people, and hopefully it will inspire some to glorify the Lord for what He has done. So let me just close with Psalm 77 again. And we'll end the stream. And thank you all for joining me. I can't tell you how much I need you guys. We need each other. So let me close with Psalm 77, verses 11 through 14. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the people. And thank you. Take care, and God bless you.